School board meeting to order. We will note, number one, public access to meetings. Due to the public health emergency, the need to limit gatherings, we are encouraging members of the public to attend school board meetings remotely, although members of the public are welcome to attend in person as well. We'll move into item 2, our roll call and verification of quorum.
Mr. Mansky.
Here.
Ms. Va.
Ann?
Did y'all hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Pope.
Here.
Ms. Portson, here. Mr. Wade.
Here.
Ms. Scott. Here. Mr. Ebel.
Here.
Ms. Rano. Excused.
Is excused.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Erler.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. I'll just note that Carlin Krautkramer, who is our typically at our meetings taking minutes, is under the weather tonight, and so Barb has agreed to step in and help out, so she'll be kind of dual purpose tonight. She'll be recording our votes. Carlin will be reviewing the tape after the meeting, and she will be creating the minutes out of the meeting.
Thank you, Barb.
Thanks, Barb. All right, we will move into item 3, which is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will move into item 4, public comments. At the March 8th, 2021 meeting, the school board approved reinstating in-person public comment at meetings and will also continue accepting comments submitted by email pertaining to specific items on the meeting agenda. We did not receive any items that were related to items on our agenda or any comments related to items on our agenda. Yeah, could you go check the sign-up sheet?
There aren't any.
Okay. So there are no members of the public who have signed up to make public comment. Is there anyone here this evening as a member of the public who would like to make public comment on an agenda item? No one is indicating. So we will move into item 5, which are our presentations. And the first item is our communication report. Sarah O'Donnell.
Yes, okay. Hi, thanks. This is different. In your packet, you will find your communications dashboard for May. Please note we continue to see higher than usual engagement, which we've seen since we sort of started the pandemic engagement efforts. We have seen media slow down a little bit. We'll continue to see that as we move further and further away from the school year. And then once we get back into August and September, we'll start to see that pick back up again. My intent with communication from a district level to staff, to general public, specifically parents, is unless we absolutely need to communicate something, we're not communicating. We feel like everybody just kind of needs a break, needs a breather, get some space away from what was a really difficult school year. And then when we start coming back, we're hoping folks will be, kind of refreshed, renewed, ready to go again. A few other things I wanted to mention. Every year, the Wisconsin State Public Relations Association, WISPRA, offers us an opportunity to submit work that we've done for review by our peers in other states. This year you can submit up to 3 projects. We submitted a special purpose project, our reopening of schools plan for 2021, marketing material, our 2020 point of discovery school enrollment campaign, and our video piece. For the video category, our summer school introducing COVID procedures video that we did. Each of those received our highest honor awards of excellence. So really proud of that work and proud of everyone who helped make that happen. That was not just a solo effort. And then the last thing I want to mention is an update on our school perception surveys. Those have closed. We saw our highest response rate that we've seen since we began to do the surveys. So really pleased with that. School Perceptions is in the process of pulling those reports together for us. One of the benefits of having them do the surveys and do the reporting is it pulls all of that bias out that might accidentally creep in there if we had someone internally doing that. So we'll begin to see those reports trickle in hopefully by the end of the month and have reports to the board probably in August.
Any questions of Sarah?
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. We will move into B, which is the superintendent's report.
Today was the first day of summer school, and I'm going to have Corey Hirschberger come up to the mic, please, and go over an update on summer school.
So as Craig had indicated, today was our first day of summer school. All in all, things went fairly well. We had a little bit of a dismissal snafu at one of our elementary buildings, which caused our transportation to be delayed by about 45 minutes. So we generally have some transportation issues that first day. Today was just a little bit longer than what we normally expect. But the good news is we have a plan in place for tomorrow, and we're hopeful that as the days go on, things will get better. We're glad to have our kids back, glad to have staff back in a face-to-face environment. We're happy to report we have 2,329 students enrolled at this point for a total of 3,286 courses. The number of students is about 80% of our summer school enrollment pre-COVID in 2019. So we're really thrilled about that. Some of our high interest courses this year include STEM classes, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. We have a Curtains Up that is a theater class. And then we have our Jumpstart kindergarten and first grade. So those early primary grades have a pretty high enrollment. We have taken some late registrations. Today we still had parents calling. I think that they were just anxious to get the year ended and they weren't thinking about registering for summer school. So if we had space, we let them enroll. We are having a really difficult time finding lifeguards. What we've learned is that last year, a lot of those water safety classes didn't take place because of COVID. So the city pool, the YMCA, and other surrounding districts are finding a hard time with lifeguards. So we did have to postpone the first week of session 1. We're trying to figure things out. We do have session 2 and 3, we think, ready to go, but we're going to keep in touch with families as far as session 1 goes. All right, thank you.
Any questions of Corey or Craig with regard to summer school? Thanks, Corey.
I would like to recognize Rasheen Willis, Spash Jr. If you get an opportunity, Google her name. She set a record at just over 2 minutes, a national record for 16-year-olds in the 800-meter dash, which qualifies her for the Olympics trials in Oregon starting June 18th. That's a really big deal. If you look at it, it's just amazing how far ahead she is from everyone. She's at 1 second off from breaking the national record for any high school student, and she also just recently broke the Wisconsin Valley record in the 400-meter dash. So that's pretty cool stuff. Congratulations to Rasheen. That's all I have, unless there are any questions for me.
Any questions for Craig? Okay, we will move into our consent agenda. The consent agenda includes the minutes of our prior school board meeting of May 10th, 2011, the approval of the schedule of monthly bills, and employment recommendations. I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion by Evil and a second by Scott. I will have Barb call the roll due to the monthly bills.
Ms. Rano is excused. Mr. Ebel?
Yes.
Ms. Portson? Yes. Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Wade?
Yes.
Mr. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Va?
Yes.
Mr. Mansky?
Yes.
Ms. Earler?
Yes,
8-0.
thank you. We will move into item 7, business services, and I'll turn that over to Mike Wade as the chair of the Business Services HR Committee.
Thanks, Meg. The first item under business services is A, approval of the preliminary 2021-22 budget. And I don't know if Dr. Owens is here to talk about that.
Tom's in here somewhere.
I know.
Tom? Yes.
Oh, he's over there.
I-
Must.
Evening.
Evening. Y'all are betting what you're going to tell us with respect to the
on the
numbers.
preliminary budget now, are we?
Yes, yes.
Well, that's good timing. I'm going to put up on screen here. Oh, I did this 4 times this afternoon. It worked perfectly.
That's the norm.
No, it does not. Is there something else disconnected in it?
Nope, I think it's going right now, Tom.
Ryan will fix it.
It's doing what it did before. No, I have lost my mouse.
Would you like me to share my screen, Tom?
You gotta take this off.
Tom?
Yeah,
Corey can share.
Corey,
his.
Would you like
can,
me to share my screen?
you don't, do you have the PowerPoint?
Nope, but I have the agenda.
Just give me a second.
Actually,
He could send it to you.
This is the image of my screensaver, but it doesn't go beyond that to show everything else that comes up.
We would like to just be there.
Yeah,
There you go.
thank you.
Ryan to the rescue.
Thanks, Brian.
Technology is wonderful. Okay. Let's talk about the preliminary budget. Why do we have a preliminary budget? Well, Wisconsin statute provides that we should have a preliminary budget because we have right in here a period of time between now and the end of October when we actually set the final budget. Between this period and that, we still have business to perform. So adopting the preliminary budget allows administration to expend funds during that interim period to meet the needs of the bill, to meet the needs of the district, to pay bills, et cetera. One very important thing is right here. This preliminary budget, it is extremely incomplete. I like to say a budget is always wrong, even the final one, because it is an estimate, and we're looking to see a lot of things that are going to happen. In this case, a preliminary budget is extremely wrong. Funds such as the debt service through community services, these funds in here tend to be a lot more accurate at this point because we're not waiting for a lot of information. The general fund is very inaccurate, and I'll show you why as I go through further more slides. The The special projects funds, usually the biggest part of that is special education fund. That too is affected by a lot of projects, a lot of state aid monies that we haven't been certified yet, so we don't know what's going to happen there. This information down here is important to understand, but it's also important to understand that it's quite wrong at this point. Equalization value, for example, of our district, I'm estimating 2%. It is not official at all. It's just a number I plugged in so I could provide, a rough levy estimate, et cetera. This levy says it's going down 633, but it's not accurate. I mean, we don't know what it's going to do yet. So consequently, when I divide that by the equalized value, which is also a guess, the levy rate is also inaccurate, but that's the mechanics of it. So it's very important that you understand this, because undoubtedly some of these numbers will find their way into the media. They'll be printed, our levy's going to be this or that, and I'm telling you that's not accurate. This is just preliminary. We have to do this, and it's just the way the numbers fall out with the estimates that we have. But we know they're not going to be the final ones. Okay, this is the upper part is the general fund at this particular point. Right now, we're showing a deficit of about 1.8 million. Some of that is a structural deficit that we have to begin with of about $1 million, but the rest of that is just numbers that, again, we don't know what our state aid is going to be. We don't know how many students we're going to have. We don't know what our equalized value is. There's just so many unknowns at this point. So when we go down and look at things like debt service here with our fund balances and our revenue and our expenditures here, these are fairly accurate here. Capital project fund, you're going to see a great deal of expense. We're about 2/3 of the way through all of the projects in terms of the finances, et cetera. So that's moving along nicely. The rest of the funds are in balance, are doing quite well. This is just another look at how we might break out the different information. This is what you call a source report. This is semi-detailed source, meaning that it's like 270 school activity income. Across the top, you will see the different funds. This is the general fund, special project, and then it's all totaled to the right. This is a table that you see in the annual budget once we get to that point, as for information purposes. When we go down to the bottom of this, then these totals along the bottom match the information that you have in your packet. Another way to look at the same information that's presented is by looking at it in what we call semi-detailed function. It's laid out the same way with the funds across the top and the different functions. Now you may say, what the heck is this object function? What is all that? That has to do with the accounting system. So a function is the function in which something is occurring. So let's say we're talking about elementary education, like a kindergarten classroom. That function is 110,000. It's called undifferentiated, because it is not specific. It is not a math course. It is not an English course, which would be 122,000. So it's not specific. So this is a pen. It would fall under a supply account, technically a 411 object, 410 general supplies. So if I were to use this pen in kindergarten, then it would be a 411, 110,000. If I were the principal, that function number would actually be 241,000, which you see down here under school building administration under 240. That's a higher roll-up. Then it would be a 411, 241,000. So that's kind of how it works. So you'd have the general fund, which is the 10. Then you'd have a location. High schools in Wisconsin are a 400 location of, could be a 401, could be a 410, whatever. And then you'd have your 411 and 241,000. That's kind of how the whole system works. But that's just the mechanics of the accounting system in the state of Wisconsin for schools. This is just a same kind of layout, but this is taking those objects, and now we're looking at them a little closer, salaries and benefits, and coming right down through the different things. Here's the 400 non-capital objects, 410 would be supplies, and 411 would be a general supply. We'd get to the pen and that type of stuff. And then these other things are tied in with different activities that are going on in the various funds. This is something you've seen from time to time as you've been on the board. It's the revenue limit worksheet. I'm not going to take you into detail through it, but I'm just going to back out a little bit side here. The first page, back out here. The first page here, this upper area here is actually the numbers that come from the previous year. And this number right here is carried forward on the next page, in the top, and I'll show you that later, and follows everything down as we do the calculation. This area in here is very important. This is you've heard the 3-year rolling average, perhaps in the media, or you've read about it. This is the 3 years that occurred prior. Let me zero in on this. So this is 18, 19, and 20. These are this would be the fall of 20. So what happens is this 18 drops out, this 19 comes down here, this 20 comes down here, and this is the unknown yet. We won't know this till the 3rd Friday in September when we actually do the student count. So this number in here, I just repeated what's here. I have no idea what we're actually going to get. No one ever does, but we have to put something in there. So then what happens is this 3-year average here, when you average these 3 numbers out, here, let me get to my pointer. I can see my cursor, but you can't, so I'll use a little device here. So when you add these 3 numbers together, you get this number here. When you add these 3 numbers, you get this average number here. This is lower than that by about 88 students in this example. Last year was 114, I believe. It was quite unsettling because there was the COVID impact of people staying home, etc. We had a lot of younger children that didn't show up, and that really hurt us a lot. So what happens is when you have this number lower than the upper one, that's called declining enrollment. And then what happens is, in this case 88, this generates a little over $900,000 in what they call hold harmless. So we don't lose that full impact in that 1 year. Now that sounds great, and it's helpful for the first year. But what happens is the next year when it's carried over, you lose that, and that's what this shows you for. You see right here, this 4.7 million, that wasn't revenue limit. I mean, that wasn't enrollment decline. That had to do with a different type of thing in terms of debt service. But that's a negative, so that means that that's subtracted out. So what happens is, excuse me, one other thing down here. This is down here is just where we pick up the equalized value that carries over to the next sheet. This is the first page of that next sheet. So you have that in your packet. So that 74 million is carried right there to that first line. Now we start our calculations down. You've heard things like the low revenue ceiling. Well, that's this number right here. Right now it's $10,000. So if we were under $10,000, we'd get some additional help. But we're $260, $267 above that, so we don't. Okay. You've heard about allowable per pupil member increase. In other words, somebody's saying let's increase the per pupil and the revenue limit. That's this right here. That has typically been somewhere around $200, $215 over the years. We had 1 year where we had negative in there. We had some years where we've had nothing.
Tom, where is that number? What line?
Right, this number right here, allowable per pupil member.
We can't see your
You can't see your cursor.
cursor.
Okay, let me use the laser. That's right here in this purple. Says
Okay.
allowable
So
per
you're
pupil.
putting in zeros right now.
I'm showing zero right now.
Because we don't know what the state's gonna do. We don't know what the state budget's gonna look like.
Right now, the Joint Committee on Finance has passed their portion of it, or are recommending no increase in this, which is, for us, in terms of trying to meet the bills and everything, extremely bad news, because that's $200 a pupil, 7,000 pupils, $1.4 million. That hits us very, very hard.
And that's calculated in the anticipated deficit of 1.8.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, you see how these all interplay. There are literally thousands of accounts all interplaying on one another, some revenue, some expenditures, and a lot of critical information that's missing because that's the way the legislature set the process up. So as we fall
Tom?
down through
Tom?
here,
Excuse me just a
yeah,
second.
can you speak into your microphone?
Okay.
That'll help my bad
Sorry,
hearing.
Tom. I remember, Craig, you talking about the fact that we might expect 2.4 million to come in from federal money at one time. Is that what that is? That's now zero?
No. What we're talking about here is the increase to our pupil base. You can see the $10,264. That's what we get per student. Typically, an additional or approximately $200 gets added to that. And that's what's happening in Madison right now. The governor is asking for this, the Joint Finance Committee is saying zero. That'll get flushed out. If that doesn't, if we get zero, then we'll have a 1.8%, $1.8 million deficit. If we get $200, then our deficit's $400,000. It's a significant issue. The money that you're referring to is Esser, and that's the COVID Esser 3, which is the COVID's 3. We were told we're gonna get
6.2.
6.2, a substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
But they're arguing in Madison whether or not they're gonna actually fund public education high enough to be eligible for the money. So the feds are saying, you're not putting enough money into your system, therefore, we're not giving you the money. So there's a lot of politics, and for our school district and all school districts in Wisconsin, it's a really big deal. So when Tom's saying, these numbers, they're gonna change, we have no idea, nor do we have control other than communicating with our legislators, and Tom, on behalf of the administration, has done just that. So, two completely different issues.
All the zero, I'm sorry.
So I just want to note also that allowed per member change is what we as a district would receive through the state legislature to pay for our regular expenses, to pay for our staff, to pay for our buildings, to pay for energy, to pay for
All programming and
all
operations.
programming and operations. The Esser funds are funds that the federal government is providing to states that have maintained a certain level of their regular funding, but it's a 3-year funding. And it's a very prescribed what it is that we can spend those dollars on, which are not on our regular operations. They are on they are on things that we are looking to do as a district moving forward, in large part for remediation of students. It's for allowing us to cover expenditures that but for COVID, our district would not be spending. But it's a 3-year process, and then those funds go away. So we right now are in a situation where we're not sure what we're going to get, if anything, in terms of that increase per pupil going into next year, which would again allow us to fund our budget, which gives us that 1.8 million deficit, potential structural. But then we also are in a holding pattern of whether we will be able to receive those additional federal dollars that would allow us to, for example, hire additional reading support, hire additional counseling support, hire additional EA support, to really be able to work with kids who have fallen behind because of what's happened over the course of this past year with COVID.
So the fact that that's zero is really a worst-case scenario.
Correct.
And the $1.8 million deficit follows along as that's our worst-case scenario, right?
Yeah.
Because of that?
Let's
Okay,
And just-
assuming a 2% increase in valuation,
yeah.
which, again, that's likely, but it's not a guarantee at this point.
And just so you don't get too comfortable understanding it, there's another kind of per pupil amount. It's in a categorical aid. It's paid per pupil. There's this one that's in the revenue limit. That's $200, $250. And there's a similar amount that's in a categorical aid that the legislature split out some years ago so that they can address the needs of districts who don't get much state aid. The wealthier districts or the lake districts and things like that don't qualify for some of these state aids. In order to afford property tax, they created a categorical per pupil aid, and our budget does not reflect that increase either, so that's contributing towards the deficit. And the joint finance, their logic, it's some of behind the logic of what they're using is they're thinking, why should we take state taxpayer dollars and give it to schools if the federal government is providing money to schools? That's their thinking. The difficulty with that thinking that it's creating for us is the federal government has within that legislation they did pass in the COVID legislation the requirement that the state fund at a level similar to prior years. And if they fail to do that, then the state will not qualify to receive those federal funds. That's where you've been seeing the roughly $2 billion with a B dollars, where they say we might not get it if the legislature passes what they're doing. Well, the problem also is that as was mentioned, the problem is that there is limitation within the federal legislation, which does not allow us to just use it any way we want. We have certain criteria that we have to use, certain percentages that we have to meet. 20% has to go to learning, catch up, or people that are falling behind and things like that. So it gets pretty complicated, and it's very, very political. So we just have to sit back and see what happens, and when the dust clears, then we take whatever scraps are given us. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean that whatever we wind up with, we're going to have to work with, and that's just the way it always is. So just want to impart that this is pretty iffy at this point. So anyway, as we go down through this worksheet then, in calculating our revenue limit, here's a very important number in the middle of the page. You can't see my cursor, but you can see the middle of the page. It's in red. It says October 15. That's our general aid. I don't know what it's going to be. Nobody in the state does because they haven't set the budget yet. Another reason this budget preliminary is off. But I'll quit saying that. You already got the idea. But anyway, this is estimated at 42 million. That is over half of what our revenue limit is. So any variance in that is going to change very much our revenue limit. I mean our property tax, because here's the preliminary revenue limit. When you subtract these numbers, which is comprised of the October aid from that levy limit, this is the maximum we can levy. So state aid affects the levy directly. The more money we get in state aid, the lower the property tax levy. It's just the way it works. The less aid we get, the higher the property tax. And I can see right here in black and white, state aid in the form of general aid is more than 50% of our revenue limit. Not our budget, but of our revenue limit. So then that brings us back to the same opening page again where I started out with. I kind of like to do that, so I kind of tie the circle. And that's the preliminary budget. I'd recommend that you adopt it so that we can move forward and pay our bills, et cetera, but I would not look at this with any reliance that it's extremely accurate, because it's not.
However, based on estimates and the information we have, we're looking at a potential reduction in our tax levy.
Yes, we're looking at a potential
And
reduction.
again, that's just
Again,
based on what we know right now.
Again, depending on what happens with all the things that are.
And I'll note to the board and I'll note to the community that right now, when we're sitting at the 818 that we were sitting at this past year, I believe the only district within our area that has a lower rate than we have is Auburndale. Most of the districts around us are $1 more, a couple dollars more, several dollars more. And again, historically, that goes back to when the state came in the 90s and froze our levies to create cost controls with states. They froze us where we were at. At that time, Stevens Point was, on average, statewide, a very low spending district. And so we were frozen at a lower level than our counterparts. We have also gone to successful referendum less often than a number of our surrounding counterparts, which is how we wind up at that lower levy rate in comparison to the districts surrounding us, which poses unique, difficult challenges for our district.
So, Tom, question, during the year, as you were making your business reports, every now and then, once in a while, I would ask you or Mike, can we tell how we are, during the year? Can we tell, are we really being over budget? Are we under budget? Are we right where we are? I mean, is there really a reliable way to do that during the year?
To some degree, yes. I mean, we look at the prior year's performance percentage-wise at that particular point in the year. Like, let's say, for the 6 months through December, are we bringing in about the same amount of revenue as we did in prior years, or expenditures, et cetera? Are they fairly close? And we can get a gauge on that, yes. Notwithstanding any huge change like COVID, we could track it fairly closely. Not with exact precision, but fairly closely. Our estimates are usually pretty good too. We usually can come in at less than 0.5% or 1/4% margin error, 0.25 error within 2-3%, sometimes even less than that. But when you get around this time of year with the biennial budget, if there's this much, what's the word I should use, variance in what's going to happen with the budget, it gets pretty tough at this point to know, because some of the very biggest numbers are the ones that are going to change the most. Because we've got pretty tight controls on everything else. Our per pupil allocations in the departments and the buildings tie it down very tightly. The board watches that very closely. We crank that down. All of our salaries, benefits, and everything are pretty well locked in and controlled pretty closely. So the biggest variance is what the state's going to do in terms of funding us, or, like I say, if something really unusual happens that creates an expense we weren't expecting.
Are you ready for a motion, Meg?
Any other questions of Tom before a motion of board members?
I will move to approve the preliminary 2021-22 budget as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion by Wade, a second by Scott. Any discussion or question on the motion? All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
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 All right.
All right, the next item under Business Services is item B, the 10-year capital improvement plan.
Okay, the next item up you have on your handout is this table. It's part of the memo, and the second page of the memo. Just a concept about this particular layout that you have. The most important year is year one. That's what is going to be in the budget, or what is in the budget coming up. As you see, that's $433,000. That's within the budget. This particular 10-year plan captures some of the bigger item things that we're doing. They're not huge dollar amounts. It could be $2,500, which a lot of them are as they go across. This fits in with the 46 fund because you have to have a 10-year plan with a 46 fund, but we've been doing this type of incremental planning for years. Okay?
Tom, does yours look different
This
than mine? I'm
is
trying to find it.
the 10-year capital improvement
It's right in
plan.
the agenda.
I think I
G.
just saw it as
If
you flipped it.
If you take
Yeah,
a look
that's
on the
it.
agenda,
That's the
yeah.
one.
It does, oh,
Yep.
it just looks different on my page.
Yep.
I was going to put it on the screen, but this thing's acting up again, and it dumped me out, so I'm not going to mess with it. But so the way this works is the first year is activity that's going on in the budget, and then the next year, the next 2 years going out. Or maybe you can get that up there. There, thank you. Okay. Okay, this is, we take 433,000, just quite, there it is. That's in the budget. These years are a couple of things we're keeping in abeyance. We're kind of looking at. It's not definitely going to be moving forward. Some things in there probably will come forward into this first year. Something could come from here into this year if we felt, say there was a problem with a concrete in a particular sidewalk that blew up over the winter or something like that. This is to give us visibility. These are projects and activities that we want to keep on our radar. Roof projects, tuck pointing, all kinds of different projects. Some projects recur, purchasing of floor cleaners, extractors, and things like that. We want to keep them in there. When we get out here in the 10th year, forget about it. I mean, that's just a holding ground, dumping ground where we put a lot of possible projects, but probably may never even do. But we just want to have them out there so that they're not forgotten. We keep them out there, just kind of a holding place. So that's kind of how this works, etc. The board can change this plan at any time they want. We just bring it into a board meeting, you look it over, you discuss it. If there's a project that you wanted to do that's not on the plan, you can bring it in, talk about it. If you wanted to add it, you could. If you wanted to take it off, you can. This is part of a larger program that I do on a spreadsheet. And I have the ability to be able to click in any one of those cells, and it'll open it up and tell us what the item is in detail, what the total amount is for that item, etc. So it gives us a lot of visibility. In your packet is an example of the detail. This is the exploded or exposed full amount of that first column, just to give you an idea of some of the items in there, etc. And as I said, they can change, etc. But we've got replaced some roof sections, and we've got painting, and we've got security panel updates, things, all kinds of things like that. So that's the 10-year plan, and we are required, and we would want to anyway, bring this to you annually for your review and for your approval per Wisconsin statutes.
Tom, how much is in the Fund 46? Approximately.
That is in your packet under the financial report. 3.5 million.
How much you said?
3.5 million.
3.5?
3.5. Yeah. Okay.
So the amount that we have in Fund 46, it's not going to be enough to do all these projects, but the idea is we're going to possibly be adding to Fund 46 over time as we're able.
Right, these expenditures right now are not coming out of the 46 fund. Thank you, if I misled you that way, I apologize. This is just, our 10-year plan coincides, we have to have a 10-year plan to have a 46 fund.
Gotcha.
And these are projects that are within our buildings and grounds budget in the general fund. And if we had an item that you wanted to do that was not in this list, and we didn't have the funds in the 10 fund, and we wanted it to come out of the 46 fund, then I'd have to come to you with this. We'd have to modify this and let you know we're taking it out of the 46 fund and then do it. You need board approval.
Part of the operational referendum 3 years back, we had two questions. One was capital improvements. That's what we'll be completing by the end of next summer. However, we approved also an operational referendum, and within that, we increased our budget in the area, specifically in facilities and buildings and grounds, very separate from the referendum projects. These are ongoing maintenance costs that continue, and we just were, quite frankly, underfunded in buildings and grounds. That led to the need for the capital referendum.
Any other questions of Tom with respect to the revised 10-year capital improvement plan? So I would be looking for a motion.
I move to approve the revised 10-year capital improvement plan as presented.
Do I have okay, motion by Wade, second by Ebel. Any discussion or question on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion passes.
The next item under business services is 7C, review of annual budget calendar.
Okay, we'll move to June on the calendar. This is a review of the calendar. You don't have to take any action, but just to touch up. We're here in June in the calendar that you adopted last November, December timeframe. The school board approves the preliminary budget so we can move forward. In July and August, we do continual refinements as we gain information. September, we get updates in terms of pay and benefits, et cetera. There's a rollover that has to occur once contracts are settled, et cetera. That's not in this budget yet, so there'll be additional costs that are going to be in here that, so expenses aren't finalized. And then in September, we have to complete our third Friday count. It's very important. That date is very important. The child has to be in the seat. It's called seat count on that day, or if they were absent, if they were there the day before and then they return some period of time afterwards, they are counted. What we don't want to see happen is somebody be here the whole year, start out, be here the whole year and then leave Thursday and not show up Friday. Because, that hurts. But anyway, so that happens. So then October 1st is when we get our equalized value. Now, a lot of people get confused. They hear this equalized value. What does that mean? It's full market value. You see it on your property tax bill. Full or fair market value, full fair market value, full market value. It just means the full value of the property, etc. The state does it on an equalized basis so that when you're one municipality to the other, you have comparability. Because municipalities they used assessed values, which means they start out at they can start out above equalized actually, and it draws down and it changes. The net effect is the same, it's just a matter of mathematics. But if we levy $5 million to a municipality, they're paying $5 million, whether you divide it by one number or another, it changes the assessed mill rate, but you're still raising the same amount of money. But they have to do it on an equalized basis. So those numbers, we don't get that till October 1st. Then in, well, let's just, we have to publish. October 15th then, that's the date two things happen. This didn't used to happen, but now it does. The first thing is that we get what the state says is going to be our estimate of state aids. It's still, it's a pretty close estimate. Sometimes they change it, but it's usually pretty close. That's that $42 million number I was talking about in the revenue limit. That's when we get that. Then they also give us what the private school voucher impact is going to be. And so this last year it was over $1 million we had to add to our levy and pass on to the taxpayers, and then we collect that, but then the state takes that same amount of money away from us in our general aid, so it's a wash to us, and we just become a conduit of money. Basically, we collect it and the state takes it. And then the effect of that, I do put in the budget document. If you look at the current years online, it's there 24/7. You can see on one of the tables, it shows what the impact of that voucher is by municipality, et cetera. So then, come October, on the 25th, then we hold our annual budget hearing, go over the budget, kind of like what I did here, maybe a little bit more detail, and we've got much better numbers. And then after that hearing is done, then we go into the school board meeting, and one of the functions within that regular meeting is the adoption of the budget and the levy. Once that's adopted, then we have so many days to take the information, create the state tax forms for the municipalities, and we send those out to the clerks to establish the levy within each of the municipalities. And that has to be done by on or about the 8th of November. There might be, it's changed a little bit in some statutes, maybe the 10th. And then what happens? We're in the November, December, we start everything all over again. When we're just this many months into the school year, 21-22, we start working up the instructions and the process for 22-23. And off it goes again. And the cycle continues. In school business, school operations, it takes a full year to see what happens. As you noticed, when you guys got on the board, you see things once, and sometimes you don't see it again until the next year, and that's just the nature of the beast. It takes one cycle, 1 year. So that's the budget guideline. That's where we are, and that's where we're headed for the next few months.
Do board members have any question on that budget calendar on how we will be moving forward? Thanks, Tom.
One more item.
Yep.
Two more, actually.
And the next item is 7D, Financial Summary, Referendum Progress Report.
Got that one? Let's go to the next one. Actually, we'll use Mike's table tonight. Okay. Can we just squeeze it a little bit? There we go. And I want to see the numbers at the bottom. Picky, aren't I?
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Can I see the top too? This should be the expended. Total paid to date is 52.2 million. We've issued 71.2 million in contracts to date. And we've paid the contract balance 52. We've got 19 million yet to pay in the contracts that have been issued. So it's moving along well. We've got roughly 2/3 of everything in motion going on. And we've got roughly about $7 million more in contracts to let and activities to do. So it's moving along quite well. We've got, we've got Washington's done, Jefferson is almost done, Madison is almost done, it will be by those two by the end of the summer. Moving out, Kennedy is done. Coming back in, we've got Roosevelt in the south, that's done, and we got McKinley is going to start up later on. Some work is being done now. McKinley's going on right now, McDill. is the one that'll have some stuff going on in a little bit. Spash is pretty much done. PJ and Ben Franklin are in the process of full bore finishing up the stuff in there. The new heating systems, et cetera, at PJ, so they should have some decent climate control in that building finally. And let's see, Bannock will be next year. We've got some activity at the bus terminal, that small project there that'll be started probably next year. Some of it perhaps this year, but the main parking area next year. That's concrete overlay. And then, let's see, there may be some activity coming up in support building. So I mean, we're getting pretty close to being wrapped up here.
We continue to meet with Nexus, the cabinet, every Thursday, whether it's in person or whether it's WebEx, and go over as a group every building and any question or issue that comes forward. It's been really an interesting process.
Any questions of Tom about the referendum project progress? It just seems like yesterday when we
Crazy.
started the first project, and, you know, we were able to make really good progress over the course of this past year. I know we've seen some of our bids are coming in a little bit higher than anticipated, like is happening, you know, all over right now because of how busy construction is, but the district's very fortunate that the vast bulk of these projects occurred at a time when our bids were very helpful to keeping us on budget, you know, as we had promised the taxpayer. So, okay.
All right, and the last item under business services, item E, which is review financial statements.
These are our monthly financial statements, and the first, they're through April, the end of April, which is the most current information we have with the bank deposits before they closed out. There's a lot of information in here, but it's broken out for you to take a look through with some information by fund. We've got, you might recognize, you got some of the source objects in there that talk about the, that's on page, well, it's labeled page number 1 of that particular report, but that shows you the 200 sources which are local, and then you get into the 500 or 600 rather, which are state, the 700s which are federal revenues. And then as you turn the page, you start to see the detailed objects. So you get the 100 salaries, the 200 benefits, the 300s are into your purchase services, and the 400 into your general supply stuff, et cetera. And then that works through by fund as you go all the way through. And in the back part, then you have your balance sheet accounts of your assets, liabilities, and fund equities go through. So it all is tracking pretty much as expected.
Any questions with respect to the, our budget, where we are, how we're moving forward? Okay.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. We'll move into item 8, human resources, and we'll stay with you, Mike, as the chair.
All right, we just have one item, item A, addition of 1 FTE under program support specialist classification.
During,
Beth or Craig?
yeah, during the EDI recruitment and interview process, it became evident that it would be very difficult to meet all the requirements for one person without additional support. So we're requesting approval of an additional program support specialist. The funding of this would come through Esser in the event we actually see those dollars. And if not, it would come through CEIS, which is one of Caleb's accounts, Coordinated Early Intervening Services.
Do board
So we're
members,
requesting approval for that position.
do board members have any questions with respect to this item?
What is, is that, what is the job description for this position?
That's on top.
That was shared.
Should,
That's the person who's going to support the equity and diversity position, right?
yeah, you would have received a
Yeah, okay.
job description on that. The job description will focus on working with students and teachers,
Yeah.
staff.
So that's not an administrative position?
It's a program support specialist position. We have 3 contracts in our district, teachers, administrators, and program support specialists. It's the in-between contracts that when we want to hire a school psychologist and there's no school psychologist available, which are on administrative contracts, we hire somebody that has the expertise to fulfill the needs working with students, and we give a program support contract. We have about, probably a dozen or so of those positions.
Carla Lockman's position is one of
Carla
those
Lockman,
at Boston
for
School
example.
Forest.
Yeah.
I mean, there's several that are kind of very distinct, and then there are a number of.
Not
such as this one
administrators,
that
they're
are-
not teachers, so they're lumped in a group of odds and ends, if I may. You'll recall years ago, we cleaned up our contracts. When I came here, I think we had like 5 different contracts and just wanted to simplify, and so we're down to 3 contracts.
So are there any questions with respect to the additional 1.0 FTE in the program support specialist classification? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to approve an additional 1.0 FTE in the program support specialist classification.
So moved.
Motion by Ann, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Any discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all of those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? The motion carries. We will move into item 9, educational services, and I will turn that over to Rob as the chair of that committee.
Is that,
That's-
we're not under general then?
No, it's the Kennedy childcare proposal, I think is the
Nope.
sole
We're at
item.
Kennedy Child Care.
Yeah, that's the one we're on now, under ed services. And Corey's got a presentation for us.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to ask Jamie Granger, principal of Kennedy Elementary School, as well as Sherry Stanchek, our early learning administrator, to come forward. As you know, and as you've heard previously, we've talked about the problem in the Junction City, Kennedy attendance area, in that there is not sufficient childcare services. So we've got a presentation for you, and then at the end of the presentation, we are asking for your approval to move forward with licensing and offering a childcare school as part of our Fund 80 community service. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry and Jamie.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. Jamie and I are so excited to share this presentation with you, and we will jump right into some feedback that we received from a needs analysis that we had distributed to the Junction City attendance area in mid-March or so. We were very pleased to have gotten 82 responses back from that survey, which was pretty impressive given the size of that community, and I think that really speaks to the need for this. Within that survey, 25% of the 82 had indicated that they have open enrolled a child out of the district because of childcare. 68% indicated that they would be interested in childcare if it were offered at Kennedy Elementary School. 46% reported that childcare options impacted their ability to work. So, can move on, Corey, thanks. So when we think about community, or please think about community on this next slide. In Junction City, we know that to be a small but very loyal community within our larger Stevens Point Area Public School District community. And Kennedy, especially because of the rural nature, is at the heart of that smaller community. We know that a community need in Junction City is that of childcare. Due to those childcare needs, many families have sought childcare outside of the district, and that has resulted in the district losing students to students that are open enrolling out. Moving forward, we're going to focus on three C's, if you will. Community, which we talked about already. Continuity, specifically related to reduced transitions of our students entering kindergarten. And cost, because in this case, there's a mutual benefit not only to the district, but to our Junction City families. Specifically thinking about continuity for students, one of the things that we know to be the case with all students, but especially young children, is reducing transitions. That's a huge source of challenging behavior, and that starts out very early on. In fact, even before what we're proposing we would start at for childcare. And that's because of a variety of different reasons. Children struggle with self-regulation at that age. They don't have an understanding of time, so they're unable to predict what's happening. And so when those things are present, we're unable to successfully get to the social emotional instruction of the work that we do with our youngest learners. So when we think about reducing and minimizing those transitions, we know that we could more effectively offer social emotional instruction for students if we had a consistent environment and continuity between staff and classrooms, etc. Again, having more oversight in that would allow us to be very mindful in how we schedule students and their routines, again, to reduce those transitions, offering more time for intentional problem-solving instruction and application. And that would just offer an easier transition of our students when they enter kindergarten. We know that there's a very big transition for students when they go from 4K to kindergarten, and the younger the student is, the bigger the transition is because of some of those developmental milestones that haven't yet been mastered. Another benefit in this case would be the access that we would have to support their academic growth and achievement. If we were able to deliver the instruction, we would be able to have complete oversight of that, intervene when needed, possibly be screening for students that might have disabilities at an earlier age, or provide more targeted instruction to reduce the need for special education. Thinking about now another C, the cost factor. As I said earlier, there's a benefit not only for the district in this proposal, but also for families. We would be potentially recouping some of the lost funds related to open enrollment. We would be providing local families a cost-effective child care alternative. And we would potentially increase overall enrollment by attracting new families to the community. So the Community Services Fund is the funding source that we would be looking at to make this all happen. Child care services are outside of the district's regular curricular and extracurricular activities. Providing child care services is only possible for us by using the Community Services Fund. Child care services are open to any child, and district enrollment is not required. But if we do a good job, we might open enroll in. So when we think about startup and sustainability, there's three big areas to consider, and that would be facilities, human resources, and curriculum and costs. Thinking specifically about the facilities, our first priority is the availability of physical space. In this case, we have the ease of use of one of the Referendum classrooms. We have the use of our building food services. And we have easy access to drop off and pick up in collaboration with our wonderful partner, the Boys and Girls Club. With regard to human resources, there would be the shared use of pre-existing Kennedy staff, which would allow for reduced startup costs and increased benefit to the child care program early on. We would also be able to utilize Kennedy's custodial and clerical or office support. There would be a pupil services support for these students, as an example, the nurse or special education staff. The Kennedy principal and Jamie and I would be working to support that program jointly. And we would use the food service staff as well as shared professional development for our district teachers, assistants, and child care teachers. A consideration here is the curricular resources. One of the nice considerations related to the continuity for students is that knowing the students would roll up into 4K, we would want to use a grade level equivalent for their instructional planning purposes. And so going into the upcoming school year, we would be using a 4K curriculum called Frog Street, and so we would use the 3-year-old version of that for child care. We have SMART, which would be specific to 4K, that we would be able to introduce to our students as they're developmentally ready to receive, as well as handwriting without tears, and that really important part of the work that we do in 4K, which is the intentionally planned play-based instruction that's progress monitored that we can target when needed. And so Jamie is going to take over here to talk more specifically about costs.
Great, thank you. So the initial cost that we were looking at runs roughly about $5,000 just as the startup for starting with toys, supplies, just the things to get rolling on that part of it. We will be able to repurpose some of the items from the Bannock Early Childhood Center in order to do that. After researching other public school child care programs in our immediate area and then other child care facilities within the Stevens Point area, our suggestion is to address the lead child care provider and assistant care provider at the costs plus benefits. Once we hope to get above the 10 students or participants in it, then we'll look to have 2 staff members in order to meet all of the needs of small children. Sometimes that number sounds so small, but there's so many needs that the kids need at such a young age, and that part of it. Staff retention and continuity is a huge plus. Those are difficult areas in the child care field, and we have such a great onboarding process through our human resource department. And the supports that come through that part of it, I think, will be a great asset. We were also looking and talking and find that the staff retention initiatives that the district has started would be very beneficial overall. Lastly, another staff retention benefit would just be the professional development. We have so many staff members with such a variety of needs, of expertise levels. They would be able to help us out. We anticipate a large variety of need depending on family and worked hours. So these are our proposed hours, which include before school, after school. We also look at wraparound care for the 4K program, a day program for potential students that aren't quite age eligible for 4K, which would really mirror like a preschool type program. Non-school days, summer times, and then drop-in times, so when families need some supports in the area. Childcare ages, so right now we're looking to service students that are 3 through 6. We top off at that 6-year-old level because we continue to partner with Boys and Girls Club. They're a wonderful partner. So just this June, we needed to move to no longer accessing Boys and Girls Club until students turn 6, which really impacts our kindergarten students, which is a new hurdle that we're looking at Kennedy that just arose. We want to not go beyond 6 at this level just because we want to maintain that excellent relationship with Boys and Girls Club. Our Boys and Girls Club is just outstanding at Kennedy, and it continues to attract a high number of students overall. So we want to continue to partner with them overall. There may be some certain circumstances. Boys and Girls Club have some criteria in order to qualify and work in their program. So there may be some circumstances that we will need to meet some of the students' needs, extending beyond that. Suggested childcare rates. So we worked with a couple different public school childcare programs in the area to really understand. They've really worked through a lot of different areas, and it seems rather complex, but we're offering three different, supporting three different areas because of, the variety of family needs overall. So full-time care, part-time care, partial time care, so less than one day a week or less on that part of it. And then the different hourly rates in order to try and meet everybody's needs overall. All right, so some of the other suggestions that we really just looked at is that minimum of an hour charge, scheduling payment ahead of time. This was a really neat, we were trying to figure out how to really service staff, to schedule staff, and knowing that ahead of time and just really having people commit the week before seems to be a really great option that a lot of neighboring folks have found very beneficial overall. We also would be able to, work with some third-party funding sources. There's other areas to consider for different fees that come up. And then there's a potential that some of our neighboring districts also utilize the Skyward program to collect those fees also in order to reduce that part of it. So licensing, what we'd be looking for is being a public school, we'd look for to be applying for we'd applied for a school-operated license exempt childcare program. What that does is obtaining that allows us to be a part of the Wisconsin Shares or subsidy payments option. If we didn't seek this licensure, we wouldn't have eligibility for that. We'd like to participate in the quality improvement system, so our state uses Youngstar. In applying for this, we'd also be able to be a part of that. And then, we'd be expected to follow a subset of licensing rules, which, we would want to do in order to make things best for students overall. So other considerations, Sherry had talked about already, how we really want to sustain the students within our district. So while there's awesome opportunities within Stevens Point and Plover, a lot of the families that live in the Junction City or Kennedy attendance area work in the Rapids area, the Marshfield area, and quite a few actually go to Wausau. With 10 being right there for all of the families, it's a real easy access. It's just as quick to get into Stevens Point as it is these three areas. So there's a lot of really neat opportunities, but our families aren't necessarily moving this direction. We also want to continue to, as we mentioned, partner with BGC, and then continue to increase those opportunities to work with families and the community overall. So the next steps would be to complete that licensing application. We've met and talked with Desiree, who's the local licensing representative. She's great to work with. We'd continue to work with her, create those marketing materials and share the information, create paperwork and systems, hire and train staff, arrange room and begin the programming planning, recruit participants, and then those ongoing communications with BGC. The Y program has been very supportive in offering us advice and working through, because they're real experts along with many of our child cares in the Stevens Point area, especially ones that we partner with for 4K. And then lastly, just working with transportation and food services. Students would potentially have opportunities to use transportation to get to 4K in order to get there. So as Corey had shared, we're making a recommendation at this point to move forward to acquire a public school exempt license and create a child care program at Kennedy Elementary School operating via the Stevens Point Area Public School District Community Services Fund. Thank you for your consideration to this project. Any questions?
Yeah, do people have any questions? Mike?
I think I understood, but just to clarify, why is it important to keep the same hours that the Boys and Girls Club is keeping?
So it's one of the pieces of feedback that we've heard quite often is that there's a convenience piece for families also, because they want to gather all of their children at the same time. Gotcha. I think that there's a potential that if there's a need, I think we've got the ability to, to see that change just a little bit, but to really utilize those hours during that period of time.
I think Anne has a question.
Oh, Anne, go ahead.
Let me know if y'all can't hear me. I have spotty Wi-Fi and whatnot here. Question here. So I'm looking at this and it says 68% indicated that they would be interested in childcare at Kennedy. Do we know of that 68% of folks who answer the survey, how many of them have children under the age of 3? My concern is if they have a child who is eligible to go to attend this childcare center, and then if they have someone younger than that, that may pose, an inconvenience for them to drop off one child at another location and then the other child at Kennedy, and if this would be an impact of folks choosing to put their children to this new childcare center.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And, it's something that we've really considered and thrown around quite often. And, there's always the opportunity to potentially expand if that is an interest in the future, to expand that part of it. As Sherry explained in her part of it, I think we're really interested in reducing those changes overall. So we're hoping that students and families will access this once they turn 3 in the anticipation that they'd be able to attend Kennedy, throughout starting at age 3. But you're right, that definitely could be something that's a barrier moving forward.
Chris and then Barb.
So you're talking about doing this in fall? Correct. So what would do you have a limitation in the number of students because what would happen, if all of a sudden you get a lot of students in, what are you able to sustain?
You want me to take this one?
Sure.
Okay, so, just based on the information that we've been able to collect and thinking about our current.
Sherry, can you speak into the mic, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
So, thinking about the information we've collected, as well as our current 4K class size, we feel pretty confident that we're not going to be full to start.
And what is full?
Fall. Depending on how many students of the age 3 and 4 would change our ratio. So when you add 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, they have some formula for determining the amount of students that you could potentially have in the childcare classroom, as well as the adults that would be required to be in there.
The maximum number of students would be 24. So Nexus helped us because it's a location that was part of the referendum project. They were able to come and do the assessment for the area. So they were between 24 and 26. The state also recommends typically 24 students or less.
24 can't go in a 4K classroom. 24 is the max number in a 4K classroom. So we just felt comfortable with having our childcare max be 24.
And that's with 2 people?
Yep. When you have 14 students, you're required to have 2 adults, but 13 or less, you could, in theory, get away with 1, but that's a real challenge, and it's really not a best practice.
Good question.
Barb?
She got it. Sorry.
2 for 1.
Thank you.
Do board members have any other questions? I guess I'll just note when I looked, I think it was about 1.5 years ago, at one of our meetings, we were talking about enrollment out, and so I had staff pull statistics for us, and the number 1 district that people are going to versus here, people who live in our area, is Amherst, which that made sense to me, especially with the environmental school that they have out there. But the other is Auburndale. And so I'm thinking this kind of is sort of explaining that to me, that we have some family. And that may not be the only reason that people would choose Auburndale versus our district, but I'm thinking that it's one of them. Clearly, what we saw from the survey was families out in that area really hoping that we'll do this.
Yeah.
And I think you guys have put together a wonderful plan, and I think to the extent we can support students and families, and we have those resources that can be shared, I think it's a wonderful idea. Mike?
Yeah, one last question. Is it pretty common for school districts in Wisconsin to have childcare at a facility? Or is it hard for you to find another district that's doing this?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say that it's super common. It's more common in more of the rural communities. And so, Jamie, you looked at Spencer.
That's the one we worked with a lot. Pittsville, Auburndale, Roshold, Adams Friendship. We're more of the local ones.
Yeah.
And then our partner in the YMCA was from the Fox Valley area and has a lot of experience partnering with school districts. She has a lot more partnerships with large school districts where they're licensed facilities. Our population didn't tell us that we're ready to move in that direction yet. We need a pretty substantial amount of students in order to make that beneficial to all of the parties involved. They tried to start partnering with Roshold and ran into a couple enrollment snafus. So they were in agreement and willing to help us, just really see where things go from here.
I think it's important to say as well, our intent is to not take away any students that would be going to childcare at any of our other providers. It's really to support the lack of options that our Kennedy families have out there. We have had we have had conversation with some of our childcare providers who had indicated, staffing is going to be a challenge. For us as well, that's the child care industry. One of the benefits to this plan is that we're going to be able to offer a higher wage. But another part of that was child care's not having concern about getting started if they can't guarantee an enrollment to start that first year. They don't have the revenue or the access to the revenue that we may be able to start with just to launch the program.
COVID really brought forth, that community need. It was really interesting to watch and really felt great that the school was definitely the hub of where people came to get resources during COVID. Boys and Girls Club did dinner meals. They did school packs from our buildings. Bootstrap partnered with us in order to find the outreach folks that they needed to. Health and Human Services was supportive in helping us do outreach. So, the folks really came to the school in order to seek out resources during this trying time. So it became a lot more evident that this was a need at that point.
Anne, did you have another question?
Oh, no.
No?
I have one more. You would be the administrator for that also? I mean,
Yes. So I think we would share, there's two different categories that need administration from that level. Sherry's got outstanding resources from the 4K perspective that we can, and professional development that we can pull down in order to support staff. I think that's one of the most trying parts of childcare in general is every child is different. Overall, and just the different circumstances that kids come into childcare with, and then providing them with professional development, and then that educational piece we're really excited about, and then just my ability to be on site in order to support the everyday needs.
you would be the administrator.
Yeah. It worked out great this year for 4K. It was a wonderful program, and we just feel so lucky that we were able to do 4K at Kennedy this year. It's outstanding, and we have a high number for next year that we're excited about already.
Any other questions from board members with respect to the presentation? So I would be looking for the motion up there to move to acquire a public school exempt license and create a child care program at Kennedy Elementary School operating via the Stevens Point Area Public School District Community Services Fund.
So moved.
Motion by Mansky. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Any discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion is approved. Thanks very much. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
So we will move into 13, which is our general category. A is sale of CISA 5 real property.
This is a property in Vesper that is owned by CISA 5. We obviously are members of CISA 5. We've actually been in this building. It was an alternative school. We were in it a couple of years ago. A number of cabinet members went to see if that's, if we were going to expand the number of students that would utilize that. They just don't utilize it anymore. They want to get rid of it. It is an old, dilapidated facility, and they simply want to sell it. For them to sell it, they need authorization from all of the school districts, or a percentage of the school districts in CESA 5. So that's what Jeremy Beal, who is the CESA 5 administrator, is asking that the board support approving the resolution that's attached, which would allow them to sell that building.
Move to approve the resolution for the sale of CESA 5 property in Vesper, Wisconsin.
Second.
So I have a motion by Wade, a second by Ebel. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Motion carries. Item B is to have the board weigh in on recommencing committee meetings starting in September of 2021. Clearly, when COVID hit us, we had, as a board, made the decision to hold off on having committee meetings during the course of COVID through this year. We are feeling, with what's happening in our district in terms of community, in terms of case numbers, et cetera, that it would be beneficial for us as a district to recommence those committee meetings starting in September of 2021. So we've got that. Since the board made a motion to stop them, the board needs to take action to begin them again. Are there any questions about that? We did have a little bit of conversation about having them, starting them in August, but staff indicated with all of the opening of school that's going to be happening, typically that August meeting of ours is relatively light, and so they felt that it would be helpful if we waited then to commence those in September. So that's the reason for that date.
Do we have start times for these already decided?
We were, when we ended them, we were starting our committee meetings at 6. And I believe we were holding, was it Ed Services at 6, Barb? You were chair at the time. Ed Services at 6, and then Business Services and Human Resources at 7. And the reason that we had done that is because with Business Services and Human Resources, sometimes we can have a relatively short agenda. And so if the meeting only lasted for a half hour, then board members were waiting around for a half hour to begin. With Ed Services, at least historically, we've had full meetings pretty much every time, because usually they involve pretty substantive presentations. And so we felt that if Ed Services started and then Business Services HR followed, that seemed to be working the best. So we would look to do that, continue with that. In the event, clearly, that board members were struggling with that schedule, we could always revisit that moving forward. So I guess I'd be looking for a motion to approve recommencement of school board committee meetings in September of 2021.
So moved.
Motion by Ebel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Wade. Any discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion passes. Item C is the appointment of a citizen member to the Educational Services Committee. That is something that we as a board approved moving forward on, I believe at our last board meeting. Our policy provides the chair of the Ed Services Committee with the authority to make the recommendation to the board with respect to a appointment of citizen members to our committee. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob as the chair of that committee.
We had 5 applications, and after review, I would like to recommend to the group that we appoint Carol Colby to the committee. She's a longtime employee. We received positive feedback, highly respected in the district. She's student-focused, focused in on the students and listening, and her experience is applicable to the committee.
So are you making that motion?
I am making
Rob?
that motion, yes.
Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
I got a second by Pope. So we have a motion and a second to appoint Carol Colby to that Ed Services Committee. Any discussion or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all of those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay?
Nay.
Okay, that will be noted, and the motion passes. We will move into item D, which is the future meetings, dates, and times. Reminder to board members, we have our annual school board retreat on June 28th. That will begin at 6 p.m. We're thinking it will run from about 6 to 9. It will be at the Point of Discovery School. The first portion of the meeting will be a presentation by all of our cabinet members, kind of a broad brush look forward to what we're looking at moving forward over the course of the next school year, with particular recognition that we're going to be looking at our strategic planning process this fall. And then we will be having a evaluation of our superintendent, and Craig's going to be bringing forward, as he does every year, goals moving forward. And then we as a board will have some discussion based on what we're hearing from cabinet and then what we're hearing from the superintendent, what we are looking at as a board in terms of a goal or goals. Over the course of the last several years, we've really focused on 1 or 2 broad goals based on, again, what our cabinet, leadership cabinet, and the superintendent are telling us about their work plans moving forward. And then we will have you keep the July meeting on your calendar in the event that we need to have that meeting, because, you know, typically that meeting we do not hold. In the event we've got some employment recommendations that we feel that we really need to bring forward to the board, that's what we're thinking would require that meeting, at least at this point in time. So we'd like you to keep that on your calendar.
What date is that, Meg?
That's July 12th. So we are now moving to, we need to go into closed session. I am looking for a motion to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 1985, paren 1, paren C, to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 1985, paren 1, paren E, to deliberate or negotiate the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or to conduct other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Specifically, the Teamsters General Union Local 662 contract and discuss employment of staff in equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Move to go into closed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Ebel, second by Wade to go into closed session. I will have Barb call the roll.
Ms. Ba?
Yes.
Ms. Portson, yes. Mr. Wade?
Yes.
Mr. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Mansky?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Ebel?
Yes.
Ms. Earler?
Yes. So we'll need about 10 minutes to get ready for closed session.
And let's use the